Unexplainable terror. 3 sinister hiking horror stories that will chill you to the bone. They thought it was just a weekend getaway, a mere escape from their suburban lives filled with work, school, and traffic jams. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows in the depths of Penn's woods, 3 families would soon realize that every week-long outing has its secrets. And so do the woods. Brian, a cautious father with a penchant for double-checking his locks, led the way, determined to foster a sense of adventure in his shy daughter, Lily. "Just keep your eyes open, Lily," he said. "There's nothing to be afraid of." But no sooner had they stepped onto the well-worn path, laughter and banter filling the air, when they felt an unsettling shift. Trees loomed ominously high, shadows creeping like fingers across their path. "What's that?" Lily whispered, eyes darting. "Probably just deer," Brian chuckled, forcing nonchalance. However, his heart raced. As night fell and the woods wrapped like a shroud around them, the familiar cracked laughter faded into an oppressive silence. Whispers of rustling leaves carried unnerving sounds that made the adults exchange uneasy glances. "Look!" Lily gasped. Dark against the sky was a figure, a flickering shadow. "Dad, something's over there." "It's just your imagination," Brian assured, but unease gnawed at him, clawing through his protective instincts as they set up camp near a crumbling ranger station, a relic of forgotten times. The campfire crackled but failed to bring warmth. The cheer of the day was eclipsed by an odd chill, a darkness enveloping their joy. The woods swallowed their laughter. Each shadow seemed to shift, and restless murmurs began. They gathered around the fire, and the adults' voices broke as they shared chilling legends of families that vanished among these very trees, spirits said to endlessly wander the trails, seeking revenge or closure. The tales turned grim, and nervous tension replaced camaraderie. Just as Brian proposed they pack up and head home, an unnatural rustle in the underbrush cut through the night. "Did you hear that?" Sarah, one of the mothers, gasped, gripping her husband's arm. The chilling sound didn't belong to the wind or harmless forest critters. The air thickened. As they peered into the dark, foreboding symbols began to emerge, carved into the trunks of the trees. Ancient markings hinting at rites long forgotten. What are those?" Gary, another dad, stammered. "Just a prank or something," Brian insisted, yet his protective instincts roiled. He felt eyes watching from the all-consuming dark, each heartbeat echoing loudly in his ears. Before they could decipher the meaning of the symbols, hidden tensions sparked like dry tinder. "You don't know anything," Linda spat at her husband. "Don't act like you do." Their accusations hung thick in the air, a shroud of dread spreading among them. Then a foul odor enveloped them, intoxicating and rotting like something pulled straight from a nightmare. Shocked, the family stumbled backward, hearts racing as panic seeped in. In the swirling smoke of the dying fire, an awful realization struck them. One among them had concealed a truth darker than any folklore, a deceit rooted in the very legends they laughed at, a link to the tormented spirits of the woods. To add to their horror, the sense of place warped. Even the trails twisted unnaturally, as if they were lost in a waking dream, every path leading deeper into darkness. In that suffocating moment, nothing felt right, and they had to ask, was it the woods that hid the terror? Or was it their own haunted pasts that sought them in this desolate expanse? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the night deepened, they huddled closer around the fire, every flicker illuminating their haunted faces. Tension simmered. and whispers turned to accusations and disbelief. Laughter felt foreign now. The woods held secrets too twisted to understand. Shadows grew longer, the air grew colder, and they could feel an invisible presence tightening around them. Who among them would make it to dawn? Who would face the darkness and come out unscathed? And just how many spirits roamed their path, waiting for the unwary? The fire crackled weakly as fear wrapped around the families like the relentless grasp of the trees. Brian fought back the instinct to flee, but the trembling of his fingers betrayed him. "We should stick together," he insisted, though the conviction in his voice wavered. It was a hollow reassurance, yet it felt necessary. Lily clung to her father's leg, her small body trembling. The dark seemed to pulse, alive with an unidentifiable menace. "Where's the path?" she whimpered, her voice a soft plea. "Right here." "It's right here," Brian said, yet his eyes flitted nervously to the shadows, as if each spine-chilling whisper might coalesce into something more corporeal. He looked to Sarah, trying to gather strength. "Why don't we just focus on the symbols? Maybe they'll tell us what's going on." But Gary's face twisted with disbelief. "You think those carvings are going to help us?" he spat, panic saturating his words. "They're not a map. They're a warning." "You're being ridiculous," Linda shot back, her voice rising, and in that moment the wind picked up, carrying malevolent laughter that seemed to curl around them, wrapping into their minds. The air thickened, an invisible weight pressing down, stealing their breath. With every gust, the distant trees swayed, bending but never breaking. Something was out there, lurking, waiting, and somewhere within the infinite pines, something watched. "Guys, keep quiet," Sarah urged, her voice barely a whisper, piecing together courage. The hushed silence that followed felt like an echo, stretching on before snapping back to fill the void. Then came a soft thud, a steady rhythm, like footsteps upon soft earth. The adults tensed. What is that?" Gary's eyes darted around. Uncertainty peeled layers off his bravado. Their hearts pounded in unison, confusion morphing into fear. Each sound seemed to amplify their vulnerability, highlighting their isolation in a world now hostile and strange. With each thud, the darkness seemed to swell, pulsing like a heartbeat. Is it the forest?" Brian asked, though doubt gnawed at his mind. Lily's wide-eyed stare spoke volumes, urging to him to believe, to trust in the supernatural that had begun to seep into their reality. "Make it stop!" she begged, desperate. Howling winds answered, screeching through the branches above like a tortured soul. Suddenly the night erupted in chaos. From the shadows emerged a figure, a silhouette, human yet grotesquely warped. The sight paralyzed them, eyes wide with disbelief, hearts slamming against ribs like caged beasts. "Run!" Brian shouted. He grabbed Lily and darted toward the crumbling ranger station, the echoes of their frantic footsteps blending with the distant thudding growing louder behind them. The others scrambled to keep pace, fear driving them faster, but hope faltered with every footfall. As they stumbled into the dilapidated structure, darkness swallowed them whole. The air inside felt stifling, like breathing through wet cloth. Thick dust motes floated, illuminated by the shimmers of moonlight trickling through shattered windows. "Close the door!" Sarah urged. But before they could, a guttural roar echoed from outside, rattling their teeth. The shadows congealed, forming shapes that twisted unsettlingly, dancing against the cracked walls. The essence of the woods had seeped inside, clamoring for their attention. Panic transformed into a dark confusion as they all fought to catch their breath. Gary hit the door, but it resisted, refusing to yield against the force pressing behind them. Whatever hunted them had an insatiable thirst, and liberation felt impossibly elusive. "Where are we?" Linda's breath trembled as emotions collided. "What do we do?" Brian turned desperate eyes to the symbols outside. The realization burst within him, cruel and blinding. They were nothing more than the latest pawns in an ancient game, the woods hungry for more souls. Then they heard the scratching, the malevolent sound of claws against weathered wood, drawing nearer by the second. "We can't stay here," he gasped, adrenaline surging. But even as the frantic pounding of their hearts pushed them toward action, something slid through the shadows surrounding them, a presence, ancient and powerful, hungry for their fear. Without warning, the door burst open, revealing the terrors that lurked outside. The night pulled back for a fleeting second, revealing a nightmare cloaked in darkness. Every instinct screamed to flee, but as they stepped forward, scrambling to escape their prison, they found their peril only deepening. They were caught between a history long forgotten and the inevitable clash of their secrets, tangled by fate. Who would confront the darkness first? And what would happen when the truth unspooled amidst the hunger of the woods? Their cries merged with the night, not yet ready to leave the grasp of the shadows, as the forest beckoned them deeper. Inside the ranger station, the air felt thick and suffocating, a visceral reminder that their haven was just as dangerous as the shadows outside. Brian's heart raced, echoing in the silence like a drumbeat of impending doom. The door lay swinging on its hinges, flapping with a mechanical rhythm against the rotting wood frame. "Close it! We can't let it in!" Sarah shouted, her voice strained, revealing desperation that gripped them all. But as they rushed to slam the door, it took all of Gary's strength to wrestle it closed against an unseen force threatening to surge through. A piercing wail erupted from the darkness, a sound that gnawed at their sanity, wrapping around their minds like a serpent. "Don't let it in!" Lily screamed, her tiny voice cracking, creating an anchor of terror in the room. Finally, they shoved the heavy door shut and secured it. But the scratching outside intensified, claws clawing at the wood, surging with a relentless hunger. Brian pressed his back against the door, his skin slick with sweat. "We need to find a way out," he muttered. His eyes darted to the windows, each shadow creating spectres that seemed to leer at them. "Are we going to die here?" Lily's whisper shattered the silence. Gary's hands trembled at his sides, but his face hardened. "We'll find a way. We have to." The wavering confidence in his tone stirred a flicker of hope, but the sharpness of panic sharpened the edges of their reality. "We should stay away from the windows," Sarah said, stepping back toward the dark corners of the room. "Whatever that thing is, it's searching for us." Brian didn't dare argue. As they huddled together, shadows darted outside, dark masses gliding along the walls of their makeshift fortress. Gary eyed the symbols etched on the walls, lines and arcs that seemed to dance as he cast his gaze over them. What if these are more than just warning signs? What if they can help us? "A map? They look like they're alive," Linda scoffed, crossing her arms. "Not a map," Gary insisted, his voice rising, "but a way to understand what we're dealing with. We need to look closer." Just then, the creature outside let loose a blood-curdling shriek that filled the room, icy fingers tracing down their spines. They all froze, breaths caught in their throats. "Is it even human?" Linda gasped, eyes fixed on the door. "What kind of monster are we talking about?" "I don't know." Gary's voice wobbled, the hope he had rallied draining away with every weak heartbeat. "But if we can understand the symbols, maybe it's our best shot." Ryan swallowed hard. Gathering his courage, he stepped closer to the symbols. He reached out, tracing his fingers over the grooves carved into the walls. Electric energy pulsed through him, and he recoiled. "It feels alive." Then it hit him, the uneasy connection. The carvings weren't just warnings, they echoed back at him, a raw history of despair and hunger. He could almost hear whispers carried on the wind, begging to share their tragic stories. Suddenly, the floorboards creaked ominously beneath them, a warning rumble foretelling their imminent doom. The scratching stopped, and the air grew still. The oppressive silence was suffocating. Panic ignited anew, and Brian darted to the window, instinctively peering outside. His heart sunk as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. The woods felt alive. Thousands of eyes glared back, each a flickering spark of malice. They were not alone anymore. Unity seemed to intertwine with an ancient primal dread. "Get away from the window!" Sarah yelled, panic bursting through her. Then the shadows surged, filling the corners of the room, creeping along the walls. A malevolent force gathered, thick as a fog, wrapping around their feet, climbing higher. They were no longer just watching, they were coming inside. "What do we do?" Lily sobbed, her tiny hands clutching her parents. "Find something we can use to fight back," Gary urged, scrambling through the debris scattered on the floor. But what could they wield against an evil so deep and twisted? The air crackled with suffocating energy, and the shadows whispered promises of despair. As fear threatened to consume them, Brian felt a faint tremor in the wall beneath his hand. Something began to awaken, wanting to rise. "What's happening?" he gasped, feeling the warmth of something powerful and old beneath the surface, linked to the symbols. A reality swirled before him, a truth, cloaked in darkness. Something shifted, and in that fleeting moment an otherworldly roar rumbled from the depths of the forest. The chaos outside felt far away as they stood on the edge of despair, knowing that survival was just a heartbeat away, if they could discover the hidden power contained within their prison. But would they access that power in time, or would it consume them? The tremor in the wall grew stronger, palpable and electric. Brian's heart raced faster, the dull thud now a frantic rhythm echoing in his ears. "Whatever this is, it's not done yet," he managed to say, fear creeping into his voice. Should we run?" Sarah's eyes darted around the room, glancing at the door, then to the windows as shadows danced in front of them. "No! We can't just leave!" Gary shouted, anger fueling his resolve. "If we understand what these symbols mean, maybe we can turn this thing back." Lily squeezed her parents tighter, her little frame trembling. "But it's coming. I can feel it." The air shivered with a collective breath, as if the darkness outside was holding a moment of tension before the storm. In that instant, the scratching returned. But it wasn't just on the door anymore. It was everywhere, walls, windows, the very floor they stood upon. "Find something, anything!" Gary yelled again, frantically searching through the remnants of the ranger station as twilight deepened outside, choking the light. Instead of weapons, he overturned a dusty table. Pictures of hikers and rangers stared back at him from faded photographs, their smiles a haunting reminder of better times. Among the shattered glass, something caught his eye. A heavy steel flashlight, long neglected but still functional. Hope flickered within him. "Here!" he shouted, snatching it up. "This might give us some light, maybe even drive it away." Brian nodded, rushing to the far corner where the symbols converged like a storm, ready to burst. They could use the light to reveal the truth, to unveil whatever ancient knowledge lay obscured in shadow. He positioned himself beside Gary, peering at the carvings, feeling the pulsing energy thrumming beneath his fingertips. "Get closer to the wall, everyone," Gary commanded, voice steady but strained. "We need to figure out what the—" A violent shudder rocked the room. The entity outside retaliated, its howls clawing at the very fabric of their sanity. The shadows surged forward, coiling around Gary's legs like serpents. "It knows we're here," he gasped, panic spreading like a wildfire through the air. The symbols flared under Brian's touch, glowing faintly, transforming shapes as if awakening from a deep slumber. He gasped as whispers filled the room, echoing eerie chants, a language of doom that should not have been spoken. "It's calling for something, or someone," he stammered, eyes wide. "Shut up!" Sarah shrieked, tears streaming down her face. "We can't listen, we can't!" The shadows thickened, enveloping the room in an impenetrable darkness. The whispers morphed into screams. Their cries became more urgent, more desperate. Gary swung the flashlight across the room, illuminating the walls once more. The symbols twisted grotesquely, becoming animated, mocking their fear. "Wait! Look!" Brian shouted, shocked by a sudden realization. "There's one symbol that's different. It's a protective sign. We need to activate it." "But how?" Gary challenged, his voice now low and quaking. The shadows pulsed, their power growing, consuming everything in sight. "I don't know. Try to focus. We need to feel it, feel the energy," Brian yelled, desperate and frantic. All at once the shadows shrieked, a cacophony of sounds tearing at their ears. Goosebumps prickled on Brian's skin, dread clawing at his instincts, but he pressed forward. "Let's concentrate on the light. Shine it here. Now!" Gary directed the flashlight beam toward the symbol as Brian laid his hand flat against it, drawing on that ancient energy. The room trembled violently, and for a moment the shadows wavered, as if recoiling from the power channeled through the symbol. Then, like a dam bursting, the force erupted. A brilliant flash enveloped them, blinding and vast. The shrieks turned into howls of rage, discordant and furious. The shadows pulled back, retreating, but just beyond the veil, Brian caught a glimpse, a gaping maw, teeth like daggers, hungry eyes ablaze and filled with malevolence. And then it stopped. The sudden stillness felt oddly barren, the whispers fading as if they had never existed, leaving only a heavy silence. "What just happened?" Sarah whispered, her face drained of color. "I don't know," Gary replied, voice trembling. He scanned the room anxiously. Something still felt wrong. The shadows were no longer visible outside, but the air was crackling with an unease that went deeper than the darkness they had just fought back. As they caught their breath, a deep rumble echoed from the forest, sending a shiver through their bones. The creature was still out there, lurking, waiting. Brian swallowed hard, dread knotting in his stomach. But there was a deeper unease, a feeling that they hadn't just activated a protection. No, they had awakened something worse. "Do you feel that?" Brian asked, breathless. "Feel what?" Gary glanced at him, alert. "The connection. It's still alive," Brian said, staring at the symbols, dread creeping back into his expression. The symbols began to pulse lightly again, and the whispers returned, but this time they felt almost inviting. "What if it wants us to come back?" Brian muttered, the realization crashing over him like a dark wave. "What now?" Sarah asked, fear etched into her features. A low growl reverberated from the woods, answered by a chorus of whispers begging of futures entwined. And in that moment Brian knew they had awakened something more than they could handle. And now it was a matter of choices, surrendering to the darkness or diving deeper into the unknown. "What if we have to decide?" he said, trembling. And still the murmur of the shadows echoed, weaving through the air like a venomous mist, inviting them into the terror that lurked just beyond. Could they resist the call, or would the dark pull them all the way down? The cold air pressed in, thick with dread and anticipation. Brian's heart raced, his breaths coming in quick, shallow gasps. Outside, a low, guttural growl echoed again, mingling with the whispers now swirling around them. It crept under their skin, an unsettling invitation to explore the depths of darkness they had only just begun to encounter. "Maybe we should... I don't know. Try the symbols again," Sarah suggested, her voice unsteady as she instinctively clutched Lily closer, shielding her from the encroaching shadows. "No!" Gary barked, his fists clenched in a show of defiance. "We might have called it here. We don't know what we've done or if we can control it." As if in response to Gary's warning, the symbols on the wall began to shift, pulsing with an energy that felt alive, hungry. They glowed with a spectral light, shadows dancing like waves across their surfaces. The air around them turned electric, static, crackling at their fingertips. Can we close it again? Brian looked at Gary, determination fighting against the terror washing over him. We have to try. Try what? Gary snapped. Throw the symbols back in reverse? This isn't some game. Whatever that thing is, it's making a choice too, and I doubt it's in our favor. The growl resonated again, closer now, a sinister promise echoing through the trees. Tendrils of dark energy gripped the edges of the room, creeping toward them like icy fingers seeking warmth. Look, Lily whispered, eyes wide as she pointed toward the symbols. That one, the protective one, it's shifting. The protective symbol shuddered, flickering between forms, as if reacting to their panic or perhaps their fear. Brian felt an overwhelming pull toward it, an unexplainable urge to press his hand against it once more. The whispers thrummed louder, merging into something tangible, a calling, a beckoning. Don't listen, Sarah urged, panic rising. It wants to trick you. No, wait, Brian shouted. We might be able to harness its power. We have to... Before he could finish, a bone-chilling howl pierced the air. Far from being a warning, it felt like a taunt, as if the creature outside reveled in their hesitation. The shadows grew restless, swirling faster, thickening around Gary's legs, as if trying to drag him into the darkness. "Help me!" he gasped, trying to shake off the shadowy bindings. "It's pulling me!" "Brian, do something!" Sarah screamed, her voice cracking with terror. "Shine the light! Keep it away!" he urged, pointing the flashlight toward Gary. "It's not enough!" Gary shouted, desperation clawing at his throat as he struggled. Flecks of darkness raked against his skin, each touch sending jolts of icy fear through him. Brian stepped forward, heart thundering in his chest. "Get ready to back me up!" With determination, he pressed his palm to the protective symbol once more. The moment his skin made contact, a surge of energy jolted through him, illuminating the room with a blinding light. The howls outside intensified, a chaotic chorus blending with their cries. "Hold on!" Brian roared as a wave of power swept through him, coursing like fire in his veins. He could feel the shadows recoil, their grip on Gary momentarily loosening in the face of the blinding light. Sarah raised the flashlight, the beam flickering against the walls, reflecting a dance of tormented faces trapped within the symbols. Each face seemed to scream, echoing the terror of the lost. The whispers twisted, growing frantic, melding into one unified cry, a name, a request, a dread. "Help us!" they wailed, the air thick with a madness that bordered on insanity. "Turn it back! Make it stop!" Gary begged, the shadows growing bolder, desperate to reclaim their prey. Feeling the struggle deepen, Brian glimpsed a sinister revelation. This power wasn't a protection, it was a gateway. "We need to make a choice," he yelled, voice cutting through the chaos. "We can't hold it back forever." "What do we do?" Sarah shouted, eyes wide with fear, the grip on Lily tightening. Brian had no answers. All he felt was that pull, a strange connection that gnawed at the edges of his mind. Somewhere deep down, he sensed something darker was waiting, willing to offer strength if only they would dive deeper. The growl morphed into a low, almost seductive whisper, tempting them with promises of control, of power beyond comprehension. The shadows thrashed violently against the light, but the choice was theirs. "Do we surrender or fight it?" he shouted. A moment of breathless silence hung in the air, tension stretched to the breaking point. Fear loomed heavily over them, whispering that perhaps the only way out was through the darkness. And just as quickly as the suspense had built, darkness slammed back, encroaching like a thick fog, leaving them with only one burning question. What would they find if they chose to step into the abyss? With the shadows closing in, one thought screamed through Brian's mind. Nothing would ever be the same again. The blinding light flickered, wavering like a candle in a storm. Shadows retreated momentarily, yet the growling sound morphed into a low rumble that rolled through the room, echoing like thunder. Brian steadied himself, heart racing, but that fleeting moment of hope slipped away as the darkness solidified again, creeping back like a vengeful tide. "Brian, it's not enough!" Gary cried, his voice rising in panic, blending with the frantic pleas of the shadows dancing along the walls. They weren't just whispers anymore. They were cries of desperation, echoes of many lost souls begging for salvation. Lily shrank into her mother's side, her small body trembling, eyes flickering back and forth, searching for reassurance. "Mommy, I'm scared," she whispered. "We'll be okay, honey," Sarah lied, pulling her closer, her own fear gnawing at her. The reality was they were trapped, ensnared by forces they barely understood. "No," Gary said, his voice breaking as he struggled against the tightening grip of darkness. "They're not asking for help. They want us to join them." Brian turned his head sharply, locking eyes with Gary. "What do you mean?" "They're lost, and they want company in their misery." His words sliced through the air, dripping with chilling clarity. The shadows pulsed, filled with malice, inviting them to step further into the dark. Brian felt himself teetering on the edge of choice. "Brian!" Sarah shouted again, shaking him from his daze. "What do we do?" He glanced at the swirling symbols, desperately searching for something, anything, that would offer a glimmer of hope. The protective symbol glowed, but only just. "Maybe," he stammered, "maybe if we can combine our power, we could reinforce it together." "Together?" Gary echoed, the glimmer of hope sparking in his eyes. "But what if it consumes us?" "Then we fight it!" Brian yelled, embarking on a desperate plan. "We're not going to let it take us without a fight." "Fine!" Gary snapped, eyes wild with resolve. "But we do this together, on 3. "Together," Sarah whispered, the strength of her voice rising against the fear that stifled her. 1, 2, 3, they shouted, pressing their hands against the symbol just as the shadows lunged. The energy surged again, pulsing through them, electrifying every nerve, illuminating the air with brilliant light. The howls reached a deafening pitch, and a chilling vision tore through Brian's mind. 100 desperate faces reaching out, twisted and gnarled in agony, pleading for release. He stumbled back, staggering against the wall, flooded with their torment. "Stop! Please!" he cried, but the shadows only intensified, swirling faster, drowning him in their despair. The room vibrated with rage, a cacophony of anguish clawing at their sanity. "Hold on!" Sarah screamed, struggling against the growing force. The flashlight flickered, the beams sputtering, threatening to die as darkness closed in. But then a voice broke through the din, clear and powerful. "Join us!" It whispered, seductive and dark, pulling at their souls like a moth to flame. Brian felt the weight of the choice pressing down on him, heavy and suffocating. "Don't listen! It's a trap!" Gary fought back, but his voice faltered as the whispers slithered into his mind. Brian closed his eyes, fighting the urge to surrender. He focused inward, reaching for the light that flickered in his heart, the determination to survive. He couldn't lose them, not to this. With every ounce of strength he could muster, he pushed against the darkness. "We are not afraid!" he roared, the sound reverberating against the walls. In that moment, the symbols smashed against each other, light erupted, a blinding flash illuminating every corner, banishing shadows back into the abyss. The cries morphed into terrified howls, twisting with rage and desperation. But just as victory felt within reach, the protective symbol shattered, shards of glowing energy exploding outward, piercing the shadows. "Brian!" Sarah screamed, suddenly pulled to the floor as the ground shook beneath them. The darkness recoiled, but it was too late. The entity unleashed a final bone-chilling roar, a sound filled with rage and frustration. The ground cracked, a gaping chasm opening beneath them. Brian grabbed Sarah and Lily, but Gary was already lost, dragged into the void screaming. "No! Gary!" he shouted, desperation flooding him. With all his strength, Brian hurled himself and the girls backward as the darkness surged one last time, swallowing the space where Gary had stood. The aftermath left them breathless, teetering on the brink of exhaustion. The whispers faded, replaced by a deafening silence, heavy as a grave. Are we safe?" Sarah's voice trembled. Brian looked around, heart pounding. Their surroundings felt eerily still, shadows lurking at the edges, waiting. "I don't know," he replied, unease creeping back. "But I think this isn't over." The darkness might have retreated, but knowing what they unleashed loomed like an unseen predator. As he took a deep breath, ready to face the night ahead, a chilling whisper caressed his ear. "You can't escape. Not yet." What had they awakened? The night was just beginning to unfold its terrifying mysteries. The stillness wrapped around them like a shroud, but Brian could feel the darkness stirring once again. It lurked just beyond the flickering beam of their flashlight, its shadowy tendrils weaving through the corners of the room like smoke. He shivered, squeezing his daughter's hands tightly in his own, as dread settled deeper in his gut. Let's get out of here," Sarah suggested, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking too loudly might awaken the shadows. "Good idea," Brian agreed, shifting his focus to the only door in sight. It stood ajar, swaying gently as if beckoning them forward. But before they could take a step, an echoing wail pierced the air, reverberating off the walls like a banshee's call. "No!" Brian screamed, instinctively shielding Sarah and Lily with his own body. They huddled together, shivering against the cold that seeped in, chilling them to the bone. The wail morphed into laughter, low and taunting, dripping with malice. He hated it. He hated how it crept into his mind, teasing his sanity. "We have to move," he shouted, breaking free from the paralysis that sought to claim him. Lily whimpered, tugging at her mother's shirt. "Mummy, what's that noise?" "It's just the wind, sweetie," Sarah lied, her bravery bubbling on shaky ground. "Just the wind." She backpedaled toward the door, pulling Lily with her. Brian took a deep breath and followed. They stumbled through the door into a narrow hallway dimly lit by cracks in the walls. The air felt heavier here, suffocating them with anxiety. Shadows flickered at the edges of their vision, inching closer. Each step felt like an invitation, a subtle lure into something darker. "Stay close," Brian urged, the authority in his voice masking his rising panic. They pressed on, cautious and alert. The laughter faded, but not the fear that clawed at their backs. A sudden noise halted them, a thud, then a skittish rustle. Brian's heart raced, the noise echoing off the cracked plaster. "Did you hear that?" he asked, eyes wide. "Maybe it's Gary." Lily's small voice trembled with hope, a misplaced anchor in a sea of dread. "No!" Brian shot back, his voice harsher than intended. "He's gone, Lily. We need to focus." The hallway branched unexpectedly, forming a Y. Two paths stretched before them, both dark and uncertain. "Which way?" Sarah breathed, her eyes darting back to him, searching for guidance. Brian felt the pulse of dread in his veins. "We need to pick one," he said, forcing his mind to clear. I think I saw something down the left." "Right!" Sarah interjected with conviction. "We go right. I just know we need to go right." Okay, right it is," he said, reluctantly following her lead, even as his gut churned with uncertainty. They stepped cautiously down the right passageway, walls seeming to close in. Every step echoed, every breath felt like a scream trapped inside. Just then, a blaring siren sound erupted from behind them, shattering the tension, and they turned as formless shadows oozed from cracks, sweeping toward them with furious speed. "Run!" Brian yelled, adrenaline surging. They sprinted blindly, racing through the hall, the shadows lunging faster, teeth gnashing, a cacophony of screams rising behind them. The hallway twisted and turned like an ever-changing maze, but each corner they rounded brought only more of the suffocating darkness. Their frantic dash finally led to a door, barely ajar and whispering promises of escape. "Faster!" Brian urged, pushing Lily and Sarah through the opening, but suddenly the earth trembled, causing the doorframe to warp. The shadows surged. They couldn't wait. He threw himself through the door just as the darkness lunged forward, its icy tendrils grasping for him, snagging at his clothes. He felt something rip, an agonizing tear of reality itself as he broke free. They landed in a cramped, dimly lit room that smelled of decay and obscured pain. The air crackled with an unnatural energy, and Brian pushed himself to his feet. "What now?" Sarah gasped, her breath labored as she steadied Lily. Around them, walls pulsed rhythmically, shadows swirling as if breathing. A feeling of dread started creeping back, deeper this time, heavier. "Are we trapped?" Lily's small hands shook as she looked up at her father, eyes wide with fear. "No, we can't be," he breathed, scanning the room for any possible way out. But then the whispers returned, louder than before, wrapping around his mind like a vice. "You are ours," they chanted. "Don't resist. Join us." The torment reached a fever pitch, and Brian realized then the door had closed behind them, sealing their fate with a finality that sent chills racing down his spine. Suddenly, a flash of light illuminated the far corner, revealing figures, twisted, ghostly forms. Their eyes were hollow, infinite sadness captured within them. "We won't let you go. We need you," they echoed, advancing with an unrelenting hunger. Brian staggered back, a wave of desperation crashing over him. He could feel the darkness clawing at him, trying to pull him under. And then he heard it again, the faint, dreadful promise. "Not yet, you can't escape." What had they truly unleashed? As the shadows inched closer, darkness engulfing them once more, Brian realized one terrible truth. Surrender might be their only option. The chilling whispers clawed at Brian's mind like fingers that sought to drag him into an abyss of despair. He felt his heart pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat echoing in the suffocating silence. Sarah held Lily, an island of fear among the rising tide of darkness. "We need to find a way out," he shouted, his voice cracking, desperation dripping from each word. But the twisted figures advanced, their hollow eyes fixed on the family with a longing that sent shivers down Brian's spine. "You belong to us," they chanted, their voices a medley of sorrow and hunger, bearing down on him like a storm. "Stay back!" he yelled, stepping in front of his girls instinctively, though every ounce of courage threatened to evaporate. He scanned the dim room, searching for anything, a window, a crack in the wall, anything that could offer hope. The shadows coalesced, thickening around the edges, drawing closer. They weren't merely hostile. They were a void, attempting to ensnare them within a web of despair. Brian remembered the last time they felt so helpless. The image of Gary flashed in his mind. He had foolishly chosen to look into the darkness too deeply, searching for answers that weren't meant to be found. What if they had made the same mistake? "Look!" Sarah pointed towards the wall opposite the figures. A faint light flickered behind a pile of discarded furniture and rotting debris. "There!" Brian's heart leaped, nudging them toward the light. "Grab onto each other, don't let go!" They bolted for the glimmer, adrenaline flooding their limbs as they barreled past the ghostly forms. The air thickened as the whispers grew louder, the promise entangled in their words, urging them to turn back. It mocked Brian's resolve as they burst past, the otherworldly arms just grazing his back. He could feel the chill seeping into his clothes. They reached the light, its glow growing brighter as they pushed aside the furniture. But when Brian stepped into it, the brightness swallowed him whole, and the cold, shadowy fingers tightened around his wrist. "What's happening?" Lily squealed, her voice a strangled gasp, laced with terror. "I don't know," Brian shouted, struggling against what felt like a current pulling him back. But the light didn't feel like salvation. It pulsed with a life of its own, as if it was feeding on their fear. "Together!" Sarah yelled, digging her heels in and pulling on Lily, who clung to her mother in a panicked embrace. Brian fought his instincts, forcing himself to face the figures. Their hollow eyes bored into him, calling for release, for surrender, for safety among the horrors. Something inside him snapped. "We will not succumb to you," he roared, the intensity of his voice echoing around them. His defiance sparked a reaction. The figures faltered, hesitation flickering across their faces. For a moment the whispers faded, replaced by a silence that amplified the pounding of his heart in his ears. That silence hung heavy, almost tangible. Then, without warning, the shadows recoiled as if in pain, and the doorway beyond the debris brightened even more. "Now go," Brian urged, dragging his daughters toward the light, but as they reached for it, the shadows fought back fiercely, rebelling against the sudden shift. The figures screeched, their mournful cries resonating in Brian's chest. He felt the darkness pulling at his limbs, cold talons scraping against his skin. Panic surged anew as he stumbled, his grip on Sarah and Lily loosening. "Dad!" Lily screamed. In that gut-wrenching moment, time warped. Brian realized that the very act of fighting had strained the bond between them and the encroaching darkness. He wrestled to pull them forward, but the shift had changed the dynamics entirely. They clashed against a powerful force tethered to their very souls. The wall of light flickered, threatening to shut them out entirely. Then a thought pierced through, a desperate wish. If they could break free of their fear, could they break the attention the shadows held over them? Brian turned back, forcing confidence into his wretched voice. "We're not afraid of you," he shouted. "Not anymore." The shadows screeched louder than ever, swirling wildly around him, flailing in disdain at the declaration, a storm of rage and sorrow before him. In the chaos, Brian felt a current shift within him. It was a flicker of hope, a surge against the darkness they all shared. "We are family," he cried, holding tightly onto his daughters. "It's working," Sarah gasped, her eyes wide with renewed spirit. The light flared again, inviting them, urging them forward, unshackling them from the murky grasp of despair. But just as they reached out for that warmth, an echoing voice pierced the air, a final desperate plea from the maw of night. "You can't leave, you're mine, forever." And in that moment, with shadows writhing violently, it was unclear whether they would break free, or become yet another lost cry among the echoes of that wretched place. The light stretched and pulsed. Would they escape into its embrace, or would a darker fate encircle them once more? Brian's heart trembled at the question. What would their fate be as the shadows closed in for one last time? The moment the shadows screamed, it felt as if the walls of the room joined in the cacophony, vibrating with their rage. The air thickened, pressing against Brian's chest, suffocating him. He crouched low, fear clawing at his throat, but somehow the light beckoned even stronger now, a beacon amid the chaos. "Just a bit more," Sarah shouted, straining against the grip of despair. Brian felt her fingers entwined tightly around Lily. The warmth of his family ignited a spark within him. He clenched his teeth and surged forward, forcing his feet to move despite their weight. The room twisted around them, the very geometry of their surroundings throbbing with each pulse of the light, as if reality itself could no longer maintain its shape under the weight of the shadows. The figures danced in a frenzy now, their distorted forms undulating like grotesque puppets on invisible strings. Brian could see it now. They were trying to divide them. One would slip past, pulling his daughters away as the others lunged. "No! Stick together!" he cried, his voice hoarse, heart pounding like a war drum. And then he felt it, a sharp tug at his shoulder. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled as he spun around. One of the shadows had broken from the pack and was advancing on him, its limbs unfurling like wilted flower petals, seeking the light. Brian's breaths came in frantic bursts, panic racing through him like fire. "Stay back!" he shouted. But the thing smiled, a cruel twist across its inky face, revealing gaping maws that seemed to pull in the very light around them. Sarah pulled Lily closer, and together they inched backward toward the light's remaining warmth. But the shadows pressed forward with malice, fingers flailing to grasp at them, to consume them. The quiet whispers were now guttural, growling words that clawed at Brian's sanity. "Don't look into their eyes!" Sarah screamed. But Brian couldn't look away. It was an impossible magnetism. Something within the void drew him, promising answers and release from this nightmare. Fear flickered within him, but it wasn't just fear. It was curiosity, a terrifying compulsion. "Brian!" Sarah's cry broke through, snapping him out of the trance. He felt her pull, the strength in her voice grounding him as she prepared to lunge forward. In that instant, Brian torn his gaze away, forcing his attention back to the light. It pulsated brighter now, almost throbbing with life. "We can do this!" he bellowed, rallying his spirit. "We are stronger together!" The moment he declared their unity, it was as if something shifted within the shadows. The nearest figure shrieked, a dissonant sound that reverberated through his bones, and Brian felt the air crackle with tension. With a renewed vigor, he crossed the threshold into the brilliance of the light. The shadows howled in outrage, the darkness reaching desperately to reclaim them. The chill grasping at his limbs numbed him, but still he fought against it, pulling his family along as tears of determination flowed down his cheeks. "We're almost there!" His voice strained, wobbling as the darkness intensified around them. Brian could feel the memory of their fear materialize into a bitter, grasping chill. The whispers became agonized wails, echoing in a wave of longing that chilled him to the bone. Then the brightness enveloped them, time blurred, the air charged with a radiant energy that cut through the shadows. With a whooshing sound, they tumbled forward into the light, a blinding luminescence filling their vision, wrapping around them as they fell. It felt like swimming. The light dissolved the dark tendrils, snapping at their ankles like bones breaking. "Brian!" Sarah's voice laced with both elation and fear. "What's happening?" The world melted around them, leaving just the family, suspended in glowing serenity. Brian wanted to hold on to that moment, but he could feel something shifting. Was it the way the light pulsed, or how the shadows conspired behind them, retreating yet angry? But it was in that silence that the ground beneath them trembled, a low hum that echoed through their very souls. They weren't safe. Not yet. "What's going to happen next?" Lily whispered, trembling. But the moment the question hung in the air, laughter, cold and detestable, rippled through the brightness. It wasn't human. It was a bone-chilling sound that slithered around them. "You think you can escape? This isn't over." Brian's heart sank. The glow flickered. Would the laughter take them back into the darkness? What awaited them now, in this fragile suspension of light? He couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows were far from defeated. Their final act was yet to come. The dread settled heavily on his chest, and the question loomed larger than ever. Had they truly escaped their pursuers, or only slipped away to face an even worse fate? The blinding light enveloped them, wrapping Brian, Sarah, and Lily in its warm embrace. But even from within, the laughter echoed, a sinister reminder that the very essence of their escape could shatter at any moment. It twisted through the air like a dark cloud, seeping into their consciousness. Brian clung to his daughters tightly, fear curling around his heart. "Stay close," he urged, even as uncertainty gripped him. The light pulsed around them, a heartbeat thrumming, but beneath its protective glow, shadows still lurked, waiting for any sign of weakness. "Is this safe?" Sarah breathed, her voice trembling. Lily's small hand trembled in hers, and Brian could see the faint flickers of terror in her wide eyes. He wished he could promise everything would be all right, but deep down he felt the truth. The shadows had only retreated, not vanished. Then all at once, the warmth of the light intensified. It surged like a wave, washing over them, filling their lungs with an electric energy. The shadows were growing more restless, coiling in on themselves as they prepared to attack. Brian felt a grim determination rising within him. They had come too far to surrender now. "This light, it's our way out. We can't let them take us back," he shouted, feeling the adrenaline pulse through his veins. His words seemed to stir something, igniting a spark of courage in Sarah and Lily. Suddenly, the laughter morphed into a cacophony of voices, each one shrill and full of torment. "You can't escape from us. We are part of you." The shadows wailed, their voices melding into one ominous whisper. "No!" Brian shouted, shaking his head fiercely, even as fear gripped him. "We are not yours! We are stronger than you!" The moment the words left his lips, the light responded, flaring brighter than ever. The shadows faltered, shrieking in anger as they recoiled. Brian felt a wave of confidence surge through him. It was as if the light recognized their defiance, blue energy spiraling into brilliant arcs around them. "Everyone, focus!" Sarah screamed over the noise, her eyes fierce and unwavering. "We can fight this, together!" "Yes!" Lily echoed, her small voice breaking through the chaos, instilling them with a sense of hope. The bond they shared became a conduit, channeling strength and resolve. With every ounce of willpower, the family united their voices, chanting in unison, "We are not afraid, we are together." The light pulsed, responding as their determination blended harmoniously with its energy. It radiated outwards, bathing the shadows in brilliance. In that moment, Brian understood. Their fear could either shackle them or set them free. The choice was theirs to make. The shadows shrieked, their forms writhing and distorting, thrashing against the light as if it burned their very essence. "Stay strong, don't let go," Brian cried, pulling them into a tighter circle as the shadows lashed out, desperately trying to reclaim their prey. Suddenly the shadows surged again, more intensely this time, pressing against the very fabric of their reality. A deep rumble echoed around them, vibrating through their bones as the darkness erupted, swirling like a black vortex, intent on consuming the light itself. "Fight it!" Sarah cried. "We can't let them win!" The shadows lashed against them, hungry and desperate. "You are ours!" they wailed, voices rising into tortured screams, each note mingling with primal rage. "You will suffer with us!" But Brian pushed the fear deep down, summoning every ounce of courage. "No, this ends now," he bellowed, standing firm. "We are family, stronger and brighter together." With those words, the light surged with renewed energy, flaring brighter than ever, a supernova erupting in the darkness. The shadows recoiled, the fear in their tortured voices turning into maddened screams as they were swallowed by the light's radiance. In a blinding flash, the room dissolved around them, and Brian felt a dizzying sensation, as if the universe itself was shifting. They were weightless, floating within a pulsating void of light. Suddenly, everything stopped. Silence engulfed them completely. As their surroundings settled, they found themselves standing on solid ground, the warmth of the light still pulsing around them in a gentle glow. Where are we?" Lily asked, her voice softly echoing in the stillness. Brian glanced around, relief flooding through him. They were in a clear meadow, the sky above bright and alive, filled with wisps of cottony clouds drifting lazily like forgotten fears. "It's beautiful," Sarah whispered, eyeing the vibrant flowers blooming in a riot of colors. "Yes," Brian breathed, hope igniting in his chest. "We did it! We're free!" But just as he took another step forward, the ground beneath them trembled slightly, sending a shiver through him. A faint, echoing laughter rippled through the air, chilling his bones despite the warmth of the day. "Not yet," the voice floated on the wind, distant but unmistakable. "You cannot escape. The shadows linger." Brian felt his heart drop. The words wrapped around him like chains, threatening to pull him back into despair. "No," he whispered, realizing the truth. They weren't completely free. The shadows were still nearby, lurking in the corners of their minds, waiting for the moment to strike again. "Together," he whispered, looking at Sarah and Lily with resolve. "We must always stay together. Light will guide us." As the sun began to set on the horizon, they held on to each other, breath steadying in unison, facing whatever darkness may come. And as long as they had each other, they would fight. They would always fight. This is their story. This is the moment they decided no shadow could ever consume them, not when the light burned so fiercely in their hearts. If you can feel the intensity of their struggle and the strength of their bond, now is the moment to stand with us. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. Flood the comment section with your reactions and theories about the ending, and don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.